This is for the teams who aren't just experimenting with AI and hybrid cloud. It's for the ones revolutionizing what these technologies can do at scale, automating repetitive work so they can elevate impactful work, speeding up how they write and code, create, and grow across customer service and IT, HR to R&D. Empowering your teams all comes down to what we start here together. Think AI that can be built and tuned to your needs. Research that informs how your business proceeds. Think a hybrid cloud that's designed to launch ideas at your pace and your trusted data connected from all over the place. Think models you can govern from day one and experts that can be there for the long run. Think digital assistants, not just a bot. Processes that are more automated than not. Think partners that are nimble and collaborative, all working together to create businesses and teams that are more adaptive. It's all right here. Your teams are ready. It's time to think scale.
Right. Good morning. Morning. Thank you so much for coming to join us today. As Brandon said, my name's Matt Candy, based in the UK, and have responsibility for generative AI globally within IBM's consulting business. And so that means work that we're doing with clients around the world in all sorts of different industries, but also how do we transform and change how 160,000 people in our consulting business work, right? Because actually there's going to be a profound change, and I can share with you a little bit about how we're approaching that. And so I thought I'd start today by sharing a little quote with you. And if you read this quote, there's words that jump out at you. So words like confused, bewildered, much excitement, feverish activity, right? Little distressed by our ungoverned, undirected energies, right? And kind of feels like a bit of the world that we're in now in the AI space. But you look at when this quote was written. These are the words spoken by Woodrow Wilson just before he became the 28th president of the US in 1907. And whilst everybody's probably feeling this level of uncertainty, anxiety, excitement about the opportunities of AI, these feelings are no different to those of 100+ years ago. And it's always this tension that's existed in the world between, kind of technology, progress, and change. And at this time in 1907, it was the rise of industrial capitalism. So, level of uncertainty for people as new technology was being applied to solve problems as it hadn't been before. But these feelings lead to this paradox that's occurring now within society, governments, and business, and this new era of technology that's facing us. And so if we look at what's happening in the world right now, it's really important because it informs what happens with technology. And so we think about population. Right? We're in a world where populations are declining in just about every country around the world. I think the forecast is there's only 5 countries that are due to grow in the next 20 to 30 years. Then you think about productivity, right? It's varying. In some places it's incredible, and in other places around the world it's not. And so it's by no means a consistent view. Then we're exiting an era of zero interest rates, right? So debt and capital is still available, but it's dramatically more difficult to access than it used to be. And so all of this leads to a really uneven GDP growth, which I believe represents an opportunity for all of us and the businesses and companies that we work in. And so you think about this equation, right? GDP growth relies on these 3 things. With population decreasing and debt access tightening, GDP growth rests completely on productivity. And this is a really different challenge to anything that we've faced in the last 100 years. And so suddenly there's this imperative, I think, in all of our companies and business that everybody's got to think about, which is why I'm so excited, and I think we are so excited in IBM about AI, because AI represents the greatest opportunity as a catalyst for growth and productivity in everything that we do. Which brings us to this paradox, right? So people are concerned about the implications of AI. Is it going to be disruptive to our work? Is it going to change our work? Who's responsible for it? Do we trust it? And so this paradox that we face is that responsibility and disruption have to coexist. And there's no other option. And I worry when I speak to organizations who are just, right, we're going to sit here and watch and see how this plays out, because I don't think there's actually time to sit back and wait and watch. We don't have a choice. And so if your focus is growth, and growth is always the one thing that's kind of moved us forward and driven improvements in the world, then we've got to address this paradox, which is doing AI in a responsible way whilst accepting the disruption that it may present. And it's very clear from a lot of what's been written over the last year, 18 months, that this technology is going to have a profound role in delivering that growth. It's going to turn up in our organizations, embedded in software platforms that run the processes in our companies, whether we like it or not. And so organizations, we believe, have got to shift to this idea of an AI-first mindset, right? A growth mindset. And so thinking about how you eliminate, simplify, and automate and deploy AI everywhere. And you start to think about this ladder of evolution around bolting AI to the side of what you do, transforming processes and workflows, but really getting to the point where AI is truly doing the work and reimagining to get to new ways of working. What can we stop doing? What isn't working, and how do we infuse every process and everything that we do in our companies with AI? Which brings us to this idea of AI success and my second equation for you today. And so to have success in AI, I think there's 4 things, right, that you've got to consider: foundation models, data, governance, and then use cases. And we'll unpack some of these. But actually, I want to add something extra to this equation, because while all of those things are really important to drive AI success, we've got to be laser focused on designing human-centered experiences that surface this technology in the hands of people, employees, customers, and users in a way that's going to make them want to adopt it. And so it must include people. In fact, it must be driven by people or to the power of people. So I'm going to start actually by unpacking this a bit with the people dimension. And so the responsibility of whether we construct a good society and a positive future for the human race, and whether we solve problems faster than we create them, is the responsibility of us, of humans, right? Nobody else is going to take responsibility for it, and of each other. And we owe it to each other, right, of how well we organize and govern ourselves through governments and the institutions and the businesses that we create. We can't just stumble into this, right? It needs to be intentionally done. And we've got to elevate and enhance the human experience for those customers that we deal with or for the employees within our company. So thinking about how we augment them with this technology. And this notion of productivity growth, it starts with continuous learning and improvement, where AI can complement, right, not replace. And so we lean into things like the Japanese concept of Kaizen, where one learns to do better what one does well already, right? So think about improving what we already do really well. Because you can't mandate productivity, right? We can't suddenly, from the top of the shop in our organization, say, you shall be more productive, here you must use these tools. It won't work. And we've got to provide these AI tools to let people become their best, so helping them make better decisions more quickly. And human advancement has always been based on our ability, right, to create and evolve new business tools, right? Tools with greater levels of sophistication that enhance and augment what we do. And so the advent of generative AI is nothing different, right? This is just a new set of tools that will change and extend all of us in business and the work that we do in society. And so with this new tool, right, we use AI to help make people better, sharper decisions, ask better questions, better connected insights with better, kind of more rapid delivery without losing our humanity in the process. And it should help drive deeper thinking. And this notion of substitute versus complement is really key here as to how you think about AI in your company. So when you substitute one thing for another, right, you're making it less valuable. When you complement both things, you increase the value, right? There's more value when they're together. And so specifically, when we're talking about important decisions, people have a conscience, they have empathy, awareness, right? And you can hold them accountable for things. You can't hold a hammer accountable for hitting your thumb. And so to make these tools matter and to help people become their best, you've got to start with design and thinking about the human at the heart of what you do. And so this letter was published actually by our CEO and chairman back in 1966. And these are words that ring truer and louder today than they ever have done in the past. And so when designing with AI in mind, right, we will help redesign both the tasks that people do now and how they work, right? We're going to create new products and services that stick in the minds of your customers, right? You're going to help people fall in love, and employees, with these new tools and experiences and the value that they bring. And so, as well as designing with people in mind, we've of course got to bring them on this journey of change. And so in that little quote I used earlier, Woodrow Wilson, he spoke of feelings of confusion, right? Bewilderment. And I think we can all agree that employees, all around the world in our companies recognize these concerns when it comes to the future role in organizations and what AI may do. And so we have to think, therefore, about how we address this. And so one of our key principles in IBM is that the purpose of AI is to augment human intelligence. Right? People are still a core competitive advantage, but generative AI is redefining every job and every task from entry level to executive levels. And so we've all got to be willing to change and move with the disruption that's coming. And every company is going to have to build an entirely new set of skills that are going to basically help them navigate growth over the next 10 to 20 years. And these are very different skills than the ones that we've needed in the past. So we've got to help people do this. They've got to be willing. We've got to bring them on the journey with us. Maybe 5% of jobs will disappear. I don't believe all of this doom-mongering that all of these jobs are going to completely disappear. Maybe 5%. Maybe there's going to be 5% of new jobs that get created. The problem and the challenge is the 90% of jobs that will change, right? And change by a little bit or change by a lot. And what people do each day, the tasks that they carry out, by varying degrees and some by a huge amount are fundamentally going to change. And so as we think about these tasks changing and how people use their time, we've got to help them navigate that change and pair and augment their work with AI. And so if we just even think about the breakdown for creative and the time for a creative, for example, we estimate that only about 30% of the time is spent on actual creative work. And you can see here how we have an opportunity to drive increase in the red bar if we can effectively pair people with AI to help them in those tasks and activities. And so when we think about the consulting and systems integration industry, as I mentioned earlier, right, I think we're industry zero for generative AI. We're moving from a world of labor arbitrage to one of technology arbitrage. And so here at IBM, we've created an AI services platform. We call it Consulting Advantage. But basically, it provides the ability for all of our 160,000 people to be able to access and work with different AI models in a safe way and work with different AI assistants that augment and help people in the jobs and the tasks that they're carrying out. So we've got 160,000 people who need to turn up each day and use assistants to augment them in their work. And so for us, this is about how we embed knowledge and expertise into fine-tuned AI models and AI assistants that can basically help carry out that work. And so our ambition becomes one of actually creating a workforce of 1.6 million AI-powered digital workers that go alongside this. And so these are AI assistants that help our teams with everything from user story creation, persona generation, business requirements definition, and you can start to think about and see how AI assistants are going to support in every element of the type of work that we do. And so as we shift on from a little assistant here helping us kind of pull out user stories, then we can start thinking about designs, right? So we think about all of our business requirements sat in Jira. How do I pull those into a tool like Figma? How do I use an AI assistant that will automatically create me all of my wireframes, right? And then how do I take these wireframes and then start to generate the React native code that sits behind these? So you start thinking about every job role and task that people are doing and how AI is going to augment things in our world. And so really, this is about creating a software platform and product for the work that we do in consulting. And so we're doing this by taking a very human-centered approach, right? We're thinking about all of the different roles that happen within our business and the jobs that people do, the work that they do, the tasks that they carry out, and then how we create sets of almost micro assistants that support and augment them in all of these tasks. And so we're highly focused on this idea of democratizing AI, a culture of democratization, getting everybody used to partnering and working with AI in everything that they do every day, and getting used to their new teammates fundamentally. Because I truly believe this is 70% a human issue, about 20% a technology issue, and about 10% an algorithm issue. And so I think we have to flip how we're thinking about this. And actually, before I took on this role, I was running the digital agency business and experience business at IBM within consulting. And so I'm not a data scientist from background, but I spent my life working with clients on creating amazing digital experiences. And I do believe this connection of experience and design through to AI and these models is where the secret sauce is. And so as we break down all of the tasks and decisions, right, we can start to understand the different roles of AI and the human. And as the quality of AI prediction, right, which is a critical component of intelligence, increases, the value of all of us and the human judgment that we have also rises. And so we're going to see a whole new set of skills required within our workforce, right? And there's going to be some new jobs, like I said, maybe 5%, but of new type of job roles that will appear. And we're already starting to see some of these in IBM, if I think about our own HR transformation, and I'll touch on some of that later and what we've been doing. And so, what you're seeing is, and that we believe, that you've got to cultivate creativity as the must-have generative AI skill, right? Problem solving, adaptability, critical thinking, communication, collaboration. Some of these are going to be the most essential skills in the workforce in the future. And there's a great view from HFS, an analyst firm, around this. And so I think it starts to make you think differently about the skills that you're hiring for and how we train and develop people. We're going to go from a world of having, I think, 30 million developers in the world to a world of 8 billion developers. Anybody's going to be able to express an idea and create technology solutions that support that idea. So we've been very busy here at IBM driving AI into our own organization, right? And we've also been packaging and making a lot of that content available for all of you and others to use externally. And so actually via Coursera, you can access a generative AI fundamentals program. So it runs over a month. There's about 5 hours a week. Or a generative AI for executives and business leaders program. It's a course of about 3 hours of content. So it's all available on Coursera, where you can go and access some of those training courses. And so, the other thing that I think is really important is leadership and drive from above. And so we have just come out of, in August, actually, the second company-wide hackathon that we did. We had about 68% of our workforce participating. So we're 282,000 people in IBM. We had 191,000 people over 10 days actively taking part in this. About 11,000 projects were submitted. And this was getting everybody hands-on, no matter what their job role, function, the jobs that they did. Using AI, using generative AI in their work, applying it to different use cases, finding ways to make themselves more productive, and finding things that we can then grow and scale within the company. We did one of these 9 months ago. We had 33,000 more people take part in this. So I think this broad scale, getting people hands-on and comfortable with this, is a really important part of the change journey that everybody needs to drive. Okay, so to the power of people. So now let's talk a little bit about foundation models, which are models really that are designed to solve business problems. And I'm guessing in the room we've got a really wide variety of knowledge and expertise on this. And so when you think about what a foundation model really is, they make neural connections, much like the human brain, which means that they can find patterns and they can make predictions, very similar to traditional AI in some respects. But more importantly, they can generate new content. And so if you think of the world we were in, creating these AI models was a lot of hard work, right? We had to prepare lots of data, we had to label it, do all of the training of a model just to get one task done, and before you knew it, the data was out of date and we had to kind of circle back round. And so this vicious cycle and a huge amount of effort in order to create models to do single tasks. And so you think about foundation models, somebody else has done a lot of that hard work for you, is a really simple way of thinking about it. There's a base model. There's already a bit like hiring a graduate from school, with maths, computer science, chemistry, physics, psychology degree, and that then you can build on top of. But as well as language models, there's a lot of other types of foundation models based on video, code, chemistry, climate change, time series data, geospatial data. We just open sourced some models with NASA last year, all based on kind of geospatial data. So you're going to see lots of other types of foundation models beyond just language. And so with these models, we can prompt them. We can prompt the data and create almost anything from that interaction. And so we're only at the tip of the iceberg with what we're going to see. And when you think about what these foundation models and large language models do, it's a really simple set of things. Summarizing, generating content, classifying, semantic search, which is really chatting with information, code generation and extraction. Right? That's really all that these models do. And if you think across your organization and think about the jobs that people do and where people are spending their time doing these things, that is where this technology is going to have a profound impact on the work that you do. And these aren't small numbers in terms of benefit, right? Significant double-digit impact that we're seeing in many of these areas. And like every new era of technology, it's about the how, right? How do businesses adopt this stuff and how do they unlock value? And I think there's a really big difference between consumer AI and the type of AI that we would use to help us plan our next holiday or rewrite an email to a company in the style of Shakespeare, to the type of AI that we need to use in our companies to drive productivity. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and some of the decisions and choices that I think are going to be really important. And so model size, right? is important. And so having 1.6 trillion parameters in a big model like GPT, right, means that it can take in a lot more detail in a prompt. It has this huge corpus of information to be able to respond with. And that may be useful in some circumstances, but in many other circumstances, it may not be that useful or helpful. And actually having all of this corpus of information in that model actually may make it hallucinate, so come up with things that maybe aren't the right answer more easily. And so there's a lot to be said about smaller models. And we firmly believe these smaller language models are actually going to have the best impact within business and enterprises for cost reasons, because the cost and the compute cost that you need to do every time you're calling one of these massive models is not insignificant. If you took a contact center with 1 million chatbot conversations a month, say about 450 words, say about a quarter of those need generative AI, about 3 minutes on length, it's about $5 million a year difference for using something like a GPT-4 model versus a Llama open source model. It's huge. That's one use case. So compute cost, cost of model access, and carbon cost as well, right? From a sustainability perspective, I think are all really important things that we're going to have to start thinking about. And so there's a lot that we've been doing in IBM around creating very small, highly performant models that are very suitable for enterprise use. And so here at IBM, we believe very much in this idea of an open multi-model approach. You're going to have lots of different models within your companies. And so therefore, thinking about the model that you're selecting, targeting to the specific use case, is going to help you deliver better outcome. And there isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. And what's really important is you're going to have to think about the data that sits inside this model. And Brandon, I think, asked the question earlier around the importance of data. Knowing the data that's inside this model, as you start to pour your most precious asset in your company together with it, you want to be pretty certain what's inside that thing before you start mixing your company data with it. And so we think some of these things are going to start to become really important to companies around the understanding of data that sits inside these models. So then we think about data, right? Well, a lot of the hype is around foundation models for good reasons. We believe, and I believe, that the only sustainable source of competitive advantage will come from data. An unclear business value is probably the biggest barrier that's stopping generative AI scaling within companies at the moment, right? I'm sure all of you have been involved in POCs, or your companies have been doing POCs, and many amazing ideas, many of which haven't actually gone anywhere or scaled. And Gartner believe that probably 30% of Gen AI projects next year will fail, will be abandoned after proof of concept, all because of poor data, inadequate risk controls, escalating costs, or unclear business value. And so we believe getting this data foundation right and the end-to-end governance that you wrap around it and how you make that data available to AI models to make decisions or to be able to generate new content is one of the most important things that you've got to do. And when you think about these big LLMs, right, Gemini from Google, GPT from OpenAI, Cohere, tons of them, these big proprietary cloud LLMs that you can all go and access now, these models are trained on basically the same thing, which is just about all of the public data that's available in the world. But then think, this is only about 10% of the world's data, because the other 90% is locked up inside all of our companies, in the firewalls, and enterprises and governments of the world. And less than 1% of that data is currently represented inside foundation models. And so this is where your competitive differentiation is going to come, right? And so we think about, what's happening in the data space, and also predictions that by, I think, the end of, by next year, 10%, Gartner reckon, of all of the data available in the internet will be synthetically generated. And by 2030, somewhere between 90 and 99% of all of the public data won't be real. Will be AI generated, right? So therefore, the data that you're going to trust, right, the data that makes the most difference to your business is going to be data that sits inside your firewalls that you control. And so how you bring this together with these models is going to be a really important part of your strategy. And so if everybody can access these big models on the cloud, then what? The watermark's just going to rise in every one of our companies because there's nothing that stops anybody doing the same thing with this. And so the competitive differentiation is going to come from beyond just prompting and working with a model to how I actually take data within my company and tune and train models around that, and these small language models that understand my unique data sets within the company. And so this idea of becoming an AI creator rather than just an AI user, and there's some stuff I won't talk about, very technical stuff, but we open source these techniques and ways in which people can bring your data in a company together with a model in far simpler ways than some of the challenges around doing model training and tuning today. And so, when you think about kind of this approach, thinking about your data, thinking about the choice of the right model for each use case, and thinking about the use case that you're applying it to, is probably some of the most important decisions and decision frameworks that you're going to have to build in your company. And thinking about how you start to put controls and layers around all of these different models. So you're starting to make it easy, because these things are coming and moving at such a pace. Okay, so if we go back to our equation, so I want to talk a little bit about governance, and then we'll talk about some use cases and examples. And I can talk to you about some of what we've been doing at IBM. And so in the 20th century, philosophers established the field of medical ethics, and it changed the practice of medicine. And so in the 21st century, we want to establish the foundations of AI ethics, right? And we want to change the use and deployment of AI for the betterment of all humanity. And it isn't the sole responsibility of techies, computer scientists, right, to figure out the most creative and imaginative ways in which this technology is going to be used or might be used. But this is about bridging the gap between two cultures. How do we integrate an artistic and a creative view of the world together with a scientific outlook? And so we think about this, we're forming relationships with machines, and if you don't have clear guidelines, right, you're going to wander into these relationships, and some things are going to work and others won't work. And so in this new realm where we're talking to machines, there's going to be unforeseen circumstances, and so we've got to be really clear on what lines and boundaries that we're not going to cross. And so risk in AI models can come from many different sources, right? And the ones on this non-exhaustive list, some of them are classic machine learning type of issues, and some are newer concerns relating to generative AI, whether that be bias or hallucination, so models generating kind of content that isn't really real, bias, so how have we actually trained the model and have we injected bias into it? But these are risky from three perspectives. Regulatory risk. So there's a lot of AI legislation that's progressing around the world. If you work in a big multinational company and you're starting to surface these things in processes around the world, you're going to have to comply with lots of different things. Reputational risk. So just because it's not illegal doesn't mean that you should do it, right? And so we've got to consider if you want your company on the front page of the news of an example of AI gone bad. And so thinking very carefully about the use case and is it appropriate. And then operational risk. And so, many AI projects aren't making it into production due to the lack of trust in the technology. And so if you think about AI regulations, they typically lag behind technology progress. And EU has adopted the EU AI Act, a significant milestone as that comes in. And it's a framework that provides, transparency, accountability, human oversight in developing and deploying AI. And so at a minimum, right, the decisions that we take, impact society, they impact economics, but treating any one of these domains in exclusion of the others is dangerous. And I do think that we've got to set kind of this idea of lighthouse principles within our companies, because when everything's murky, you need something that's going to kind of light the way and help make things clear as you're trying to make decisions around how you're using AI. And despite all of the conversation that's going on in the world around this topic, and most CEOs and leadership teams agreeing it's really important, only 25% of companies have actually done something around this and operationalized principles around AI ethics. And so it's really important as you're thinking about this journey to build into your organizational AI governance plan, strategy, operating model, processes, procedures, but also really important that you start to think about the technology that you need to put in place to monitor and to manage these models as they're being used in live productive use. Everything from inventory, where they're being surfaced, how they're being used, etc. And so it's an area that we've been highly focused on here in IBM, right? Over the last decade, we've laid out principles and policies and frameworks and guardrails for how we use AI here. And I'm sure many of you are on similar journeys. We've published a lot of this externally that you could use as a starter for 10 for your own journey. And we have three key principles that kind of light the way for us. This idea that AI is always to augment, not replace human intelligence, that data and insights always belong to their creator, and that the AI must always be transparent and explainable. We must always be able to point back to where the data is that enabled the AI to generate that output or make that decisions. And so we use these principles to light every decision. And so final part of our equation is around use cases. And so the places within the enterprise where value is going to be defined. And so I think about this idea of an opportunity canvas. I think about 4 areas where generative AI is going to have a profound impact. We've talked a lot about productivity, right? Applying it to different processes within the enterprise and how people are working. It's going to apply to changing the way we interact with customers. And so using generative AI in those interaction mechanisms. We're going to use it to build and create new types of digital products and services. And so if you think about what I described we're doing in our consulting business through this Advantage platform, that is a new business model, a new revenue stream. Think about it as a digital product powered by AI. And we think about the huge potential to change how we build and create technology and technology solutions. And so, again, if I think about our work in the systems integration space, it will profoundly change in how AI is actually going to augment and do a lot of that work for us. And so our CEO here at IBM, Arvind, recognized this priority and productivity priority, and he declared that our North Star would be to make IBM the most productive company on the planet. And so we set about this journey of infusing AI into everything that we do. And so not only that, he set this big, hairy, audacious goal of a $3 billion savings in productivity, right? A 30% improvement. And kind of deliberately ridiculously large number, because actually it forces people to rethink and reimagine how work gets done, rather than just continue to cut around the edges. So it was a very real and deliberate target that would force a very different way of thinking about the role that AI would play. And so our formula for success has been to apply this growth mindset idea of eliminating, simplifying, automating, enabled by enterprise-wide data governance, and to challenge and question everything that we do. And so our mantra is eliminate complexity, simplify how we work, and then automate manual tasks and embed AI wherever we can. Right? And the reason of doing this automation and simplification first is otherwise you just basically risk kind of adding AI to bad processes and bad data. And so, since January of last year, up until probably about April, May this year, we've delivered about 1.6 billion of that 3 billion productivity target already, just purely through automation and AI across the breadth of our company. And so if I give you one example, human resources is probably the area that we're most advanced. 282,000 people in the company. 94% of every interaction an employee has with HR now happens without any human intervention. Happens through an AI chat interface. I can get all of these tasks and activities done. It's basically become like a personal chief of staff for every employee. And it's freeing up huge amounts of time, 40% plus of manager time. We've reduced our operating budget in human resources by over 40%. We're about to move from Workday to SuccessFactors, big HR system migration. Most employees will never know because everything they do is through this natural language chat interface that sits over the top. And so I think about the employee experience layer in our company as becoming this headless, composable set of applications with this AI chat interface that sits over the top. And that's certainly the approach that we're taking in IBM. And so we flipped the script internally now. And we're starting with AI and trying to reimagine products, workflows, processes, and then in order to create a truly end-to-end kind of chat-based experience for everything that we're doing. And so this then acts as a bit of a flywheel for us. And we think about our strategy in IBM, basically working with our clients from a cloud and a hybrid cloud and an AI perspective and helping them transform their businesses. We're driving huge productivity into what we're doing with the technology and things that we basically work with our clients on, which is freeing up huge amounts of capital and cost and OPEX within the company, which we're putting back into fueling new investments. And so this flywheel, right, has been operating, and you see that in what's happened around IBM's market cap and results kind of over the last couple of years. And so we absolutely believe this is the flywheel that organizations need to start get running within their companies. And so one area that we're highly focused on, and I know there's a few Adobe people in the room here as well, in our company is also around marketing and how we transform the business of marketing with generative AI. And we believe there's huge cost savings that we can drive in this space. And so we ran our first experiment just over a year ago using Adobe Firefly. And we were the first beta client of this, and this was spring last year, and it was our Masters golf campaign with all of the tech for the Masters. And it was happening 3 weeks later. And so what we wanted to do was basically figure out a way of using generative AI to help with the marketing campaign that we built around this. And so we produced over 200 derivative assets, 1,000 different variants in a matter of days versus weeks, right? 10x the content produced in a fifth of the time. And we found that these assets outperformed our best benchmarks in social by over 26x because we have more personalized and relevant content. And so because we'd implemented Adobe Workfront, so we had visibility into the number of requests and the time that this process typically takes. Workfront is a workflow tool that operates across our kind of workflow there. And so what we're now doing, and off the back of this, and what we've been working on, is this model. And if I talk you up from the bottom, but basically we're creating this idea of branded foundation models. So we're taking small open source language models, and we're training them on proprietary data sources like our design system, brand values, positioning, brand voice, tone of voice, campaign guidelines, image guidelines, etc. And so this model really understands our brand and the voice. Then we've created a marketeer's workbench. And we've built that on our What's Next generative AI platform. So it enables marketeers to interact with these branded foundation models, right, for a wide spectrum of tasks, such as research, persona creation, journey map creation, campaign definition, content generation, etc. And then we're using Adobe's kind of Gen Studio suite, basically to realize this content supply chain vision. So from image generation all the way through, but powered through these branded foundation models that we've created through open source models. And we believe probably there's up to 80% of cost takeout that we can make in this space. And so for a company that produces a lot of content on a global scale, we believe this is a massive area of productivity, but not just productivity, getting to this idea of personalization at a scale that we've never been able to do before. So some really exciting stuff in that space. So maybe a few little other external examples as I come to wrap and then hand over to Mary. So if we think about this canvas, right? We think about productivity, we think about changing customer experiences, new types of products and services, and changing technology delivery. So a couple of examples. So, over in the UK where I'm from, we've been working with Virgin Money, one of the big banks there, and something called Ready, which is their customer-facing chatbot. We won the Best Use of AI in Financial Services award last year, and they power just about all of their customer interactions through a natural language chat interface. And this idea of trying to make digital experiences feel human. And so we've worked very closely with Microsoft, right, on this program. Then I think about places like Lloyds Bank, another bank, but we've been working with them using chatbots for many years, right, traditional NLP-based chatbots. And so what we're using is these large language models sat behind the chatbot. So you're kind of de-risking it. You're not letting the large language model loose, directly talking to a customer, but we're using it as a better classification engine. So you get those really awkward things with bots where they don't understand what you say? We're having the bot hand over effectively behind the scenes to a LLM saying, do you understand what they mean? And which of these things would you classify it into? And so we've seen huge upticks in performance by using large language models in that way, or analyzing hundreds of thousands of chat logs a day to make it, to identify new pathways to build into the bot. Places like Wimbledon, for those into tennis, and back in the summer. So we partnered with Wimbledon and the US Open, which has just started for the last 35 years. And so all of the digital experiences that we build there, but over the last few years, we've done things like AI video highlights. So we ingest all of the footage from every match in, and then we auto-curate content. So 2-minute highlight reels, the things that you see on wimbledon.com, is actually AI auto-curating. We build an excitement index. We look at player facial gestures, fist pumps, crowd noise, the most exciting points of a game, auto-curate the 2-minute highlights. Last year, we then layered spoken voice commentary, which is a generative AI model trained in the business of tennis to layer the commentary over the top of those highlight reels. And so this year, we then launched something called Catch Me Up, which is basically providing AI-generated summaries for every singles player. So describing what happened in their last match, challenges they face in the next one. So finding ways to generate content from all sorts of data sources out there that basically enhance the experience. Places like Dun & Bradstreet. So if you know of Dun & Bradstreet, hugely data-rich company. Most of your companies probably use them in procurement processes around supplier selection, et cetera. So we partnered with them at the end of last year. We are building effectively a foundation model trained on all of their unique data sets that they've got, and then building new digital products and services that they will take to market. So things like Ask Procurement is the first one of these. So this is an AI assistant that all of your companies will use to interact with Dun & Bradstreet data to help improve your procurement processes and make better decisions in a more efficient way. Or places like Seville Football Club, right? You think about football and the business of football, and talent is probably one of the biggest things that these organizations need to do. And so their talent scouts, they have a small set of them, huge amounts of data that they're trying to look through, right? 200,000 different player reports, quantitative as well as qualitative information. And so using generative AI to ingest all of this unstructured data effectively into a model, to be able to chat with that, to be able to surface amazing talent and players from around the world to help make better decisions around the talent that they're bringing into the organization. And so in closing, I want to go back to where we started. Right? Businesses and governments, I do believe we can utilize AI for growth in a responsible way. I don't think it's a question, but I do think it's a paradox. You know, we need this productivity to drive growth, to drive GDP, as we talked about, to drive advancement, but we're worried about disruption, jobs, changes that will occur. But I'm really confident that we can do both of these things. Right? We can manage the disruption, and we can avoid complacency that will come from trying to manage the status quo. Because this idea of responsible AI, I do believe it's responsible business. And business has always been about growth. And I think part of our role in technology is to ensure that growth continues to happen for everybody around the world. And so to bring it back to that quote I started with, bewildered, confused, feverish activity, can we navigate it? The answer is yes. Right? We're not dealing with anything different that people 100 years ago weren't dealing with. And so I started with a quote, and I'll finish with a quote. And this quote's most often attributed to Henry Ford. And so he said that if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think most people can envisage incremental progress, right? But it takes real visionary thinking to start to imagine entirely new ways to solve problems. And Henry Ford did that. He designed for people, and he designed a new way for them to get from A to B, a new experience. And I think every business and every one of the companies that you all work in will jump to enhance existing processes and to make productivity gains. But actually, it's the companies that really adopt this idea of an AI-first mindset that are going to innovate in ways that will change the world. And so, just to finish on a little story, my daughter, she's 16 in fact on Saturday, and at age 9, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And early on, if you don't know what it is, it's basically where the pancreas stops working and you're in manual mode, right? And so your pancreas makes insulin, and every time you eat, you create sugar in your blood, and you need the pancreas to create insulin to basically get rid of it. And so it was a nightmare, right? Lots of jabs, testing, monitoring of blood. You know, she was injecting 9 times a day, having to prick her finger probably 12 times a day to check blood sugar levels. And so I was desperate for a way to make these processes better for her, right? I was desperate for faster horses. But some clever people had the amazing insight to build her a car. Yeah? And so today she's got AI-powered monitoring, a little sensor on her arm. She has an insulin pump that talks to it via Bluetooth. And basically, as her blood sugars go higher, the AI kicks in, the algorithms kick in, and it automatically deploys insulin, and they call it a hybrid closed system. And so basically, it's almost like an artificial pancreas. I can see on my watch here what her blood sugar levels are. It alerts me. But the difference that this technology has made in her life and my life is profound. She's going to live longer and happier because of it, but all because somebody had the vision to rethink old processes, right, and to think about solving the problem in the new way. And so, my friends, I think that is the opportunity ahead of us, for all of us, right? How we rethink what's possible and then go out there and make it happen. So thank you.